Hi, a very warm welcome to Dusty Shelf Collectibles. Well, believe it or not, I've been doing this channel now for over a year, and I have to say I've loved every moment of it. It's been a fantastic experience, and I met some lovely people on the journey as well. But the premise of the channel when I started out was to take a couple of things from my collection and connect them together with a story, and I was planning to do that every week. And as you've seen over the last year, I've gone off in all kinds of directions, and I've now got a completely eclectic mix of videos on the channel that it's just gone in all kinds of directions, as I say. So today I just want to go back to my roots and do one of the videos that I sort of planned to do in the beginning, which is to take two things from the collection and tell a story linking the two together. Now, I thought about doing this particular video quite a while ago, and there's a couple of news stories that came up over the last week, and it seems quite a good time to do it. So what's the connection between these two? Well, they're both to do with Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This is a wheel off the Pepsi Max Big One. This is a Jordan Formula model of a Jordan Formula 1 car. Jordan sponsored one of the rides in the Pleasure Beach, and as part of that sponsorship they strapped a full-size F1 car onto a carriage of the Pepsi Max Big One, and one of the F1 drivers rode it around the track. But we'll come back to that in a minute. So the news stories, as of last week, the Pepsi Max Big One is no longer the tallest roller coaster in the UK. Thorpe Park building a new ride called Hyperia, and last week the lift hill was topped out, which means that became the tallest ride in the UK. It's not open yet, that's a technicality, but it is, it is a roller coaster, and it is now a few feet taller than the Pepsi Max Big One. So that's the first story. The second story is to do with the Jordan F1 car. Jordan sponsored the Grand Prix ride in the Pleasure Beach. Had all the livery, it was all painted in yellow, and there is actually an F1 car in the station of the Grand Prix. And last week, Amanda Thompson, the managing director and owner of the Pleasure Beach, tweeted that the Grand Prix won't be open this year, and sadly that's it, it's not going to open again. They're going to redevelop the area, and a lot of people are quite upset they didn't get their final ride on that one. So that's the link between these two, and that's the two news stories that made me think that this is a good time to do this video. So let's get into the two items that we have here. So let's talk about the wheel first of all. So this is off the Pepsi Max Big One. It was the tallest roller coaster in the UK, 235 feet tall. Opened in 1994 and was built by a company called Aerodynamics from Utah in the States. Now, Aero, fantastic history. I mean, a couple of engineers got together after the Second World War trying to make some money and build a little bit of a workshop, and they got picked up by Walt Disney, who used them to create some of the original rides for the original Disneyland. And as they say, the rest is history. They became manufacturers of rides and roller coasters, and indeed they ended up developing the first steel-tracked roller coaster. And there's this fantastic video on YouTube, I will put a link in the description, made by the American Coaster Enthusiasts, which charts the history of aerodynamics, and it's a really good watch if you're into that kind of thing. But anyway, they were employed by the Pleasure Beach. £12 million it cost to build, and certainly when it opened, the year it opened, it was the tallest roller coaster in, I believe, the world. I mean, it was, and it's a huge ride. So this is one of the running wheels. Obviously this is the load bearing wheel. You'd have a wheel on the side and you'd have a wheel underneath to keep it on the track. They're slightly smaller, they're only 6 inches across. This is a 12-inch wheel, and obviously in the centre here you'd have the bearing sitting on there. This would carry all of the load. And I'm just going to read out what it says on here. So this is Pepsi Max Big One 12-inch running wheel. As the name implies, these are the train's running wheels, 4 per car, 20 per train, and we use different tyre compounds to alter the speed of the trains. And on here you'll see, I can't see where it is, it's just here, you'll see that it does actually say Aero on there. It's a casting, so this is an original Aero casting. I don't think it's ever been run. I mean, maybe the compound got a little bit too old and they couldn't use it or something. But I bought this probably about 10 years ago, and it does actually still got the price on the label here. So I paid £60 for this 10 years ago. And I've recently had a look on the Pleasure Beach's website. They're still selling ride parts on there. They now want £250 for one of these wheels, which I think's rather a lot. I mean, this is quite a niche thing to have. I mean, it means a lot to me. This is going nowhere. This sits up on a shelf upstairs with the other bits of roller coasters that I've got. But £250, I think that's a little bit steep. But if you do want one of these, that's the price they are now. So that's the wheel. Very, very heavy. I'm just going to lift that out the way so that I can see the car. Now the car, this is actually a Hot Wheels car, and in my investigation, which I'll come on to in a little bit, this is not the car that was used on the big one, and it's not the car that's in the station. It is, however, a Jordan. So my kind of video of all the things that I wanted to connect together, they're getting more and more loosely connected. But anyway, let's talk about this model first. So F1 car. This is a 1999 Jordan, driven by Damon Hill. It's got Damon's helmet on there, and this is, I think, an absolutely fantastic model. I will put some detailed shots in as I'm talking here, but what a quality model. And I had a look online. You can pick these up, and all the other cars from that year, made by Hot Wheels. These are £10 to £15 each, and what a fantastic model for £10 to £15. I mean, you really can't go wrong with it. I mean, if you're into Formula One and you want to collect some models, I mean, you know, if you look at the latest models that are coming out for this year's cars, they're ridiculous amounts of money. But these older ones, you can have a really nice collection here for not a lot of money. So I would highly recommend these. I mean, as I say, I'll get some detailed shots. You can see the steering wheel in there, a lot of detail on the model, and yeah, really nice thing to have. So the connection between the Grand Prix and the big one. So the Grand Prix is also made by Aerodynamics, and it came to the park in 1960, I think that's when it opened, and originally they were petrol driven cars, so they had a rail in the centre of the track, and basically the car would float across the track, and as you could steer, there'd be a little catch so you couldn't steer too far off the track. So basically if you took your hands off the wheel, it would bounce its way round and get you back somehow, but the skill was obviously driving without it catching on the centre rail. As I say, originally petrol driven. I mean, certainly I remember being hit from behind with Crazy Driver. There was no control over it, obviously no health and safety in those days, but it ran with the petrol engines right the way through to probably the early 2000s, and then was converted over to electric. Now when you leave the station, just to the right hand side of you, there's an F1 car sitting there. And I've always assumed that particular F1 car was the one that they strapped to the big one. And I've gone with that theory all these years until I started researching this video, and we'll come to that in a minute. So as you leave the station, as I say, the car's on the right hand side. You then come out of the station and go into a spiral that takes you down to the ground level, and then from the ground level you then go literally round the whole south end of the park. It's quite a long track. And then you come back and you climb back up the spiral and back into the station, and very, very popular. Always has a long queue. I mean, the throughput on it's not particularly great, but as I say, with the closure of it, people are quite upset they've not managed to get their final ride. I fully understand that. You know, some of these rides, you know, especially when you were riding them as a child, you've taken your children there, maybe even your grandchildren there, and suddenly it's not there anymore. It's, you know, it can be a bit upsetting. But back in 2003. Jordan sponsored the ride, and all of the livery on the outside of the building was all painted in yellow. I think it was some connection with an energy drink that they were trying to launch, or had some connection with it. But they sponsored the ride, and part of that sponsorship was, as I say, they were going to get a Grand Prix driver to sit in a Grand Prix car and ride round the Pepsi Max big one. Now all these years I've assumed it was Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and when researching this video it wasn't, it was Ralph Furman. So Ralph Furman was the F1 driver. The car in station, I believe, is an EJ10 or an EJ11. So EJ obviously being Eddie Jordan, who owned the F1 team, and those cars were around about 2001, came just after this car, and I always assumed that that was the car that was used for the stunt on the big one. Having put the two next to each other and compared the one that went round on the big one with the one that's in the station, it's very clear they're different cars. So the one that went on the big one was very, very similar to this, actually, in the shape of its nose and, you know, its winglets and things. But that, I believe, was an EJ13, and was indeed the 2003 Grand Prix car that the Jordan team were racing. So I think they probably took one of their racing chassis and used that for the stunt. And the one that's in the station is probably a show car, probably an EJ10 or an EJ11, as I say. Now, up until a few years ago, the car was still in its Jordan livery, and you can see on the side here it does say Buzzing Hornets, and this was obviously a way that they were trying to get around to tobacco advertising back in the day. So when tobacco advertising got was banned, they'd changed the lettering to words that were similar but keep the same font, and yeah, thankfully that's all behind us now. And it stayed in this livery in the station for many years. And sadly, I personally think the car was repainted to become part of the marketing tool for the new Icon roller coaster at the Pleasure Beach, and it's in this kind of black and orange livery that you see today. I think, to be honest with you, it's just such a shame, and I'd love to see it back in the Jordan livery. Maybe now the ride is going, they will sell the car, and some enthusiast will pick up the car and put it back into its original colours. But yeah, it's stood in the station all these years. So onto the stunt. They literally took one of the carriages from the big one, they took the seats off of it, so you just had the metal base on the wheels, and bolted this F1 chassis, this EJ13 onto the chassis, stuck our friend inside, Ralph Furman, put his belts on, and sent him up the lift hill, and he rode the coaster all the way around. Now, in an interview he said that obviously Formula 1 is the most thrilling thing, but he did hold on all the way round, and yeah, he said it was very exhilarating. Now, looking at the footage, very lucky he got all the way back to the station, because it did look as though it was going to get caught in some of the valleys. Very slow going over some of the hills. But I have to say, as a coaster enthusiast, and I will explain that coaster enthusiasts do count the rides that they go on. They keep a list, and they call it a little tick every time they go on a ride. That is the ultimate tick for me, to ride an F1 car round what was the biggest roller coaster in the world at the time. What an amazing thing to do. I don't know if it was dangerous, obviously he survived it, but as marketing stunts go, what a crazy thing to do. And to be fair, unless you're really into your roller coasters, it's not something you've probably even heard of, because it kind of went under the radar at the time. There's a few newspaper articles, and now it just, as I say, appears now and again in chat forums where people talk about the F1 car going around the track. But one thing I have cleared up: the car that is currently in the park was not the car that was used for the stunt. So anyway, that was just my crazy little ramble linking these two things together and telling you about the items. And as I say, I would recommend these Hot Wheels models. If you go and have a look, Hot Wheels, round about this time, there's the whole series of the cars on there, £10 to £15, and they are cracking models for what they are. And in terms of the coaster wheels, if you want one, they're going to cost you a lot of money now, unfortunately, which is a shame, because these are quite a nice thing to have if you're a coaster enthusiast. But yeah, £250, that's quite expensive. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that one. It was just me doing a little bit of a ramble. As I say, my channel now is all eclectic videos. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at the videos. There may be something on there. It's all kinds of subjects, everything from model railways right the way through to roller coasters. And yeah, if you can subscribe, you'd be doing me a massive favour. And with that, we'll leave this one there. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.